Welcome to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. I'm your host, Peter Lang. This show is where we dive deep into the stories, strategies, and lessons learned from agency owners just like you who've successfully bought or sold their agency. Today, I'm thrilled to have Mike Lieberman. Mike is a seasoned entrepreneur and former CEO and co-founder of Square 2 Marketing, where he led multiple acquisitions to transform the company that ultimately led to his eventual exit. So let's dive in. Mike, you've got a fascinating background, co-founding Square 2, scaling through several acquisitions, all the challenges and successes. So today we're here to unpack that journey through these acquisitions and your recent sale. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into the world of agency life and ultimately M&A?
Sure. I consider myself a lifelong marketer. I went to school for marketing. My first couple of jobs kind of exposed me to marketing. I was like, I think I can enjoy this. It scratches a creative itch of mine and a problem solving skill set that I have. And I've been doing it pretty much my entire professional life. I was in corporate marketing for years and years and years in a variety of industries. I enjoyed hopping around to different industries, travel, software, information services, home services. So I did a little B2C, but most of it has been B2B. And the last corporate job I had, I was with a software company. And I remembered very clearly, we're sitting around I was the VP of marketing, and we're sitting around the management team meeting, and my CEO, business owner, boss said to the entire management team, well, if we don't have a good month, I just won't pay you guys. And I said to myself, like, wait a minute, that's a thing? Like, I have a job. How can he just not pay me? Like, that's not how it works. And I remember thinking, well, if that's the risk I'm taking, I would prefer to bet on myself. And serendipity, I guess, or just dumb luck. A very, very, very good friend of mine said to me shortly after that, I have a lot of people asking me for marketing consulting help. Are you interested? And just for like the complete backstory, he had an ad specialties business. So he was getting people T-shirts and stress balls and pens for their trade show. And they were asking him, well, how do I get more people to my trade show? How do I get more leads from this exercise? Um, he was more of a sales guy. He really wasn't interested in doing that work. His initial idea to me was, well, you could do it on the weekends and part-time. And I was like, I have a good job. I don't want another job, but maybe there's something here that we could do together. And we started talking about what that would be. We spent a lot of time doing what good marketers do. How are we going to be different? How are we going to stay? This was in 2003, by the way, so Facebook was not even a company. How can we stand out? What do we kind of knew what was wrong in the industry. How can we do it differently? And as a result of that, this agency that we started together in 2003 was born. And then for 20 years after that's what I did. I ran a digital marketing agency.
So you went from being a career marketer to an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Uh, how did you make that shift? What was that like?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and a lot of it had to do with my business partner, to be honest, because he was an entrepreneur already. He had a couple of businesses. He was on his own. He was in a family business. So having him as my partner helped with the transition. But I remember, like, I went to the office on the first day, and I'm like, who's going to help me with my computer? And he laughed at me. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're on your own, buddy. Like that kind of thing. It didn't take me that long to pick it up, and I liked it. So like pretty quickly, I was like, yeah, I can deal with this. Like again, like I could solve a problem. I can figure this out. Figure this out. Um, and from there on, you know, I did. I liked it. I liked betting on myself, and I liked being responsible for all the decisions associated with what we were doing. We a lot of luck with this business partnership because I know a lot of them are big failures. But we did something smart in the beginning. We divvied up the company. And I didn't want to do sales, and he did. I didn't want to do finance, and he did. And I did everything else. And everything else is what I wanted to do. So I took care of the clients. I did the hiring. I took care of our process and how we were going to make our delivery, as efficient as possible. I was responsible. I discovered the HubSpot relationship that we ended up adding maybe 5 or 6 years after we got started, integrated into the service offering. So all those things that I like doing, he didn't like doing. And all the things I didn't like doing, he liked doing. And our lanes were very clear. And also when they intersected, we would discuss it. But if it was his lane, I would say to him, look, you got to decide what we want to do here. This is your area. And he would say the same thing to me. And that helped us manage through a lot of issues that I think a lot of business partners don't have the benefit of that.
Yeah, you and Eric had a good relationship, it sounded like, inside the business and outside.
Friends. Right. Shockingly enough, we stayed friends through that entire time, which again is not common.
Yeah. What did the agency look like at that time? We're talking before you did your first acquisition, you were building the brand. What was its composition?
It was a lot of people who would basically take care of clients and deliver the services we were selling. We used a lot of what we used to call scaffolding. So we had an outside finance part-time CFO. We had an outside HR person in the beginning. Really, the only full-time employees were people taking care of clients, people doing the work, me and Eric.
Right. Now, that gets us started from the building. Right now, you have this agency. You got it there. What initially led you into this world of acquisitions? And was that a natural extension of Square Two's growth? What that look like?
Right. So we were growing organically. We always had enough leads. We were able to close business and get bigger year over year through traditional methods. But I felt like it was too slow, number one. And number two, I felt like things that were going on in the agency ecosystem made it ripe for us for consolidation, basically, and an opportunity for some of us to get together. Now, again, hindsight, and as talking to the younger Mike, I think we were a little early in that process. It was difficult to convince other people that this was good for them, and here's why. But I could already see when we started doing that, which I think I think I said to you 2010 or so, I could already see where the industry was going. Too many small agencies fighting over scraps, no one really getting big, no scale, no economies of scale. A lot of things are still and were wrong with that ecosystem. And I wanted to try to be a part of that.
That's great. And that was a time of, this expanding market, right? Social media was starting to kick off, build a prominence. Facebook, its ad platform, its variations of it.
Also, interesting, one of the big contributors to this thinking was HubSpot, because we met HubSpot in probably 2008 or 2009. We became a partner right away. If you're interested in that story, it's an interesting story also. And then I started meeting all these agencies and all these owners, and I could tell right away they didn't know what they were doing. They were web guys who started a web agency. They were PR people who started an agency. They were designers who started an agency. A lot of them just didn't know really what to do or how to do it. But we had something in common at that point, and that was we all were selling HubSpot. We all were HubSpot partners. We liked HubSpot. HubSpot was very good to us at the time. They were also nurturing of the community, and there really wasn't a community then. So tons of credit to HubSpot for putting that partner network together and getting that community going. Obviously, it fueled their growth in the beginning of their company, but it did a lot for agency owners also.
Yeah, it also kind of built scaffolding to support that low barrier to entry, right? As you're referring to, there's a lot of accidental entrepreneurs in the agency world, and they're not very pro business. They're more pro service or pro marketing or a category of it. And so when you have the ability to have coaches, communities, and things that nurture you, it puts you on a path that at least gets you to profitability, gets you to some level of good revenue. And you're at the early stages of that. So you got to see them coming in and potentially probably created opportunities for you to have discussions around M&A, consolidation, and whatnot. So
Yeah.
that's
And more significantly, it helped us do better with our clients. Like, like I had, again, I'm a lifelong marketer. I had very little analytics around what the marketing was doing, right? Like, even when sales would sell something, like they never gave marketing credit for it. Like, no, I found that lead. You had nothing to do with it, right? Even though they read a press release, they came to the website, they went to an event. Like, no, I did this all on my own, and I couldn't refute it, right? There was no tracking or anything like that. So when I first started, playing around with HubSpot, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I can actually do these three things and see these results improve. It made our job so much easier. So we went all in on it. And I literally went up to HubSpot and met with Pete Caputa, who started the program. And I was like, what do I have to do to be your best partner? He said, well, if you sold 2 or 3 deals a month, you'd be immediately our best partner. And that's what we did. I told Eric, I go, don't sell any deals unless they're willing to buy HubSpot. And that was a requirement for us back then. And everyone said, okay. They didn't know any better. They liked the story behind it. And they just rolled over and signed contracts with HubSpot. And we were their top partner in a couple of months.
Yeah, wonderful. And then did that then open the opportunity for your first acquisition? Take us to that. Like,
Right.
this is 2010.
Yeah. So I met a lot of people through the HubSpot community. And a lot of the people we ended up talking about joining us from an acquisition perspective were people in or adjacent to the HubSpot community. So the first acquisition was this company down in Arlington, Virginia, who I believe I met at an inbound conference. He was not, if he wasn't a HubSpot shop, maybe he was thinking about it and we ended up talking about it. But the guy's previous experience was Microsoft partner. I don't think he really knew. He didn't. I mean, honestly, he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't want to be in the agency business anymore. He had a partner who was absolutely didn't want to be in the business anymore. He was the finance guy in the company. And we just started talking. I was like, well, maybe this is something we can help you out with. We're looking to buy agencies, and yours is interesting to us. And we just started talking. They did a lot of content. At the time, I saw content as the engine for inbound, which it was at the time. We weren't great at it. And that you'll hear this as a theme of mine. I was always looking for things that we weren't as good at in terms of who we wanted to acquire. So in this case, that was one of the major advantages of this particular company. Our first acquisition, I mentioned this to you yesterday, but the other thing, which I didn't know I was getting into, but I also was again, serendipitously interesting, is they were a remote company. So when I went down to see them, I'm like, where is everybody? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm in a Regis. Like, they're all in their houses. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, we're remote. So it didn't scare me. I kind of liked it. Being able to get the best people, regardless of where they are, was always something that appealed to me. Why do I only have to hire people in suburban Philadelphia? Like, it didn't make sense. So they got us to be remote, and that opened up all kinds of doors for the people we could hire and what we could pay them. Like, you hire someone in Boise, Idaho, they're not asking for the kind of money they are asking for if they live in New York City or San Francisco or even Philadelphia. Yeah. So that was a good a byproduct of that first acquisition as well.
What I hear you saying is you solved a problem, a need in the business through an acquisition versus starting it from scratch and hiring. And not only did it solve an intentional problem, which was content, it had a side effect that was extremely beneficial, which is it expanded the business's awareness and capability around hiring remote. Correct. Which, I mean, fast forward 2020, good, you had a head start.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like, COVID was not an issue for us organizationally. Like, literally nothing changed. When the world shut down, we were like, okay, we know what to do. Again, interesting story. I was at a client the day before the world shut down, and they were still wearing suits. They were all coming into the office. They were freaking out. How are we going to run this business if we can't come into the office? They literally could not talk to us for 6 months after that because they had their own issues to try to figure out. So for us, it was like, okay, we're good. let's just keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah. Now you received that gain in your first acquisition. So that obviously light bulb. But before we go down the next trail of these acquisitions, unpack this first one. So you source this opportunity at a conference, an industry conference where there's like-minded businesses, potential alignment and technology providers. You build rapport, you get to know people. It's a wonderful way to get introduced to an acquisition or a partnership opportunity. And then you approach them. Was it formal, informal? Did you bring in people to facilitate?
It was informal. It was informal, right? Again, like I think I just said like, hey, would you be interested in something like this? And he said yes. And we just started talking, and the conversations progressed.
Great. And then you brought in help, you had mentioned.
So, I did. Yeah. Yes. We always try to bring in experts to help us in areas that maybe we were not expert in. And also try to have people help us so that we could keep focusing on what we were supposed to be doing, which was taking care of clients, getting them results, signing new clients. So we found a company, again, through the HubSpot network. These guys specialize in agency M&A. And we were like, look, we're thinking about doing this deal. Could you help us? And they were like, yes. And their fee structure was reasonable. And they basically, the big help there was they put the deal together for us, the different components of the deal, and said, look, we looked at their stuff. We looked at what you're trying to do. Here's what we recommend. We think this is a good deal structure for you guys. We liked it and said, yeah, we agree. Let's try to make this happen. I don't believe they played a role in like communicating with our acquisition target. I think we still were talking to them, but they said yes, they were interested. Continue. We did some more due diligence, and again, I had some financial people help me with the due diligence, and eventually we got to the point where an LOI was written up. And at that point, the lawyers get involved, and you try to let the lawyers deal with the legal stuff, right?
Yeah. So you did these things that are massively important, which was you didn't take the eye off of the business. You hired experts to help get it over the line for the first one. And then the deal structure, you learned something about this deal structure that became your playbook. And in doing programmatic M&A, it's using the same thing that you did before and just doing it again and again to create some, efficiencies there. What did you learn about transactions and what you could do to grow?
Yeah, one of the recommendations from this company we worked with was to, obviously you want to generally put as little money down as possible. And in our efforts, that was an objective of ours. It's not like we had a ton of cash laying around and we're willing to hand it out like candy. So we wanted to put as little in as possible. I think we ended up going to our bank and asking for a line of credit just to finance these acquisitions. But the big thing was we had a performance floor built into their business. So if they continue to perform as expected, they get their earnout over time. And if they dropped below the floor, there was no earnout. And pretty quickly, they were not able to hit their floor, which was not great for the business, but also we weren't paying them anything either. So it worked out. Now, again, an artifact of that specific deal was all the employees stayed, and even I still had an employee when I sold the business in November from that deal that was 12, 13, 14 years old. And I had a huge client that spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with us well after the acquisition was over also. So for Square 2, the deal was a success. It could have been better, but lots of times that's what happens with these deals, right? They perform like they perform, some better, some worse. But we didn't end up paying a ton for this company, and I consider it a success.
Yeah, yeah. When you can protect the company from downside risk, you can have offset clauses. So there's recourse, there's protections in place in case the company doesn't end up doing the thing everyone thought it was going to do. You don't have failure to pay. You don't have buyer remorse. You don't have sellers who are frustrated. You protect yourself a lot from that. And over the longest possible time horizon, right? 5-year, 10-year within a business, most of these shake out to be very positive. They're challenging, right? That first acquisition done, business isn't performing. You have a challenging conversation with this owner, right? Who is still, he stayed with you, right?
He stayed with us for, one of them left right away. The other one stayed for 6 months.
So what was that conversation when, towards that 6 month, you started seeing that the business wasn't performing well? Was it straightforward?
I don't think he really cared, to be honest with you. Like, I think he wanted to be out and we got him out. Like, his big pain was paying off his $50,000 American Express bill that the company had run up. We took care of that for him. So he was ready to move on to something else. He got a 6 month contract. I don't think he really cared about the rest of it. So it was kind of a non-issue.
Yeah, and most people who aren't active in deals think when we say a motivated seller, they think it's a distressed business. So it sounds like you found someone who's motivated to move on to the next thing, wanted some financial assistance to make sure that that transition was safe for them as an individual. You facilitated that outcome, win-win for both parties, and you learned M&A by doing a deal and then a framework that you could use again and again. So that was 2010. When was the next acquisition?
Yeah, I think it was probably 2012 or so. So again, we were building websites back then pretty aggressively, and we were good at it, not great. And I wanted to be better. I didn't think hiring a new director of web was going to get us to be great. I was in a mastermind group with a bunch of other agencies, so I got to hear all their issues and challenges. I got to know them, fairly well. And one of the guys had a web shop. He was a younger guy. I don't think he really wanted to be an owner. He wanted to be an employee, but he was good at web and he started a company because that's what some people do like that. And I said, yo, you should come join us. Let us buy your business and you run web dev for Square 2. And he was very interested in that. He also stayed with us for a really long time until he went to work for HubSpot like 2 or 3 years ago. So great employee, great guy, still friends with him today. Got us in the web, got our web dev where we needed it to be. And again, like successful transaction. Now he brought in his own set of advisors, so that was different. So we had more more conversations with other experts. My experts talked to their experts, basically. And he got a slightly different deal because he brought these guys in, and I didn't fault him for that. I thought that was smart. It showed like he was like astute at what he was good at and not so good at. And again, like we were able to fold him into the company pretty quickly. I think I mentioned to you when we were doing these acquisitions back then, I had a 3-month integration plan, which to me seemed reasonable, but maybe now in hindsight was a little aggressive. But it worked out good. It worked out good in his case because everything they were doing was really the same thing we were doing. It really wasn't too much difference there. And the one thing I learned in that deal is I took him off of his job as taking care of the clients that he had and generating revenue for that business, and I put him into my company. So a lot of the revenue associated with his clients and the new business from his business was no one was able to really deal with that anymore. So
was that an expectation?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was that an expectation he set? You said, how did that get defined as an expectation?
It really wasn't discussed, to be honest with you. I was like, I want you in this role. I want you to make our websites better. I want you to take care of our clients with websites. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest with you. Like, I guess I just thought magically that stuff would get handled by him or by someone else. I don't know. And we tried hard too. Like, Eric and I went out to Milwaukee. We met with his clients. We talked to them about like, hey, this is going to be great. Now you can do all these other things. Some of them did and some of them didn't. But eventually that business, with no one paying much attention to it, went away.
Yeah, which is common.
Right.
You were involved in the due diligence process in both deals. The first deal sounded like you had a facilitator. You had someone who helped negotiate almost for both parties to figure out terms. The second one, there was opposing counsel. So you had a little bit more back and forth a little bit more, this is what is good for my client versus what's good for you. How involved was due diligence for you at this stage? Like, were you spending a lot of time on it because that could take your eye off the ball? What did due diligence look like?
To be honest, due diligence was not really my area. So Eric was able to look at like the finances and those kinds of things. I was able to look at the operations, but they were small. They're like, it wasn't complicated, right? You got 4 people, you're building a website, like you got an office, or you keeping, like, we were able to kind of like figure it out pretty easily on the due diligence side. On both of those deals. Neither of those deals were particularly complicated from a due diligence perspective. Also, I knew in the second deal, I knew this guy. So for a while. So it's not like I needed to do any due diligence on him. He was also a HubSpot guy. So there was like a understanding there about what we were doing from a technology perspective.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a theme. All of the deals we did were people I knew, not people I didn't know. Which again, I've never really said this publicly, but like through my relationship with HubSpot and the size that we became in their ecosystem, a lot of people kept asking me, "Can you help me with my agency?" So I started this agency consulting business on the side while I was running Square 2, and it became like a feeder business for our acquisition strategy because in a lot of cases, I had been working with these people for 2 or 3 years, helping them with their agencies. So when it came to due diligence, I was like, yeah, I know where all the warts are already. Again, I didn't really intend that to happen, but it worked out really nicely.
In hindsight, it's some master plan.
You want to give me credit for a master plan? I'll take it. But I was really just trying to help those people out. I felt bad, not in like I wanted to help them, right?
Yeah.
I understood their pain. I knew what they were going through. I felt like I had something that I could share with them. I was not interested really in like hoarding my IP. I was like, no, I made a little money on it. I had 2 kids in college. I had to like monetize it somehow, but like I wasn't charging them a ton of money. It was just so that they had some skin in the game. And I felt like I was getting some extra money out of it. But I just told them everything we did at Square 2 because I thought they could benefit from it. And they did.
Yeah. So you had sourced from a conference with similar technology. You then, part of a mastermind community type environment, knew another business. So you got to hear all the pain points, got to know them on a personal level. And then another one, someone you got to know personally. And then you had all these relationships with agencies where you were mentoring them and could identify an opportunity to help them in a different way than mentorship, which is through, partnership, through acquisition. So that's your third acquisition.
Yeah, the third one did not work out as well as a Canadian agency. I met this guy also through HubSpot. I'd known him for a while. I thought he was a really good guy. I thought it was going to be a really good fit. And he just imploded after the deal was done. That did not, again, the floor protected us there. So we didn't have to pay him much for his agency, but he just couldn't hang in our company. So it didn't really work out like I thought it would. But again, sourced through the HubSpot community. Good fit, sales enablement. Again, like the theme here is I wanted to do more to help companies grow. We were good at marketing, not as good at sales. We were generating leads. They couldn't close them. So I wanted to be able to help them close those leads. He did a lot of sales enablement. So I was looking for that piece to add to our puzzle with the third acquisition. Again,
Canada, Mike. What did you learn about What did you learn about going to Canada?
Don't. They have incredibly stringent hiring rules. So like when it was struggling, we're like, okay, let's get rid of 2 people. Like people were like, no, you can't do that. You have to give them 6 months notice. I'm like, what? 6 months for what? Like they're like, no, that's just the law. You can't do that. And if you don't follow the law in Canada, their unemployment laws are extremely strict.
Employee protective. Yeah.
Employee protect. Right. Yeah. So learn that lesson the hard way. I mean, I was going to ask you a couple minutes ago, like you probably know this better than I do. Like what percentage of these acquisitions, like across all industries really are like hits? It's a low number, isn't it?
70% of transactions fail.
Right.
And the definitions that create that percentage are around deal expectations, not just financial outcomes.
Right.
And what we typically find, proven throughout the sector, is the companies that acquire programmatically or predictably over time figure out what to do in the next deal, the next deal, the next deal, which means they have higher success outcomes. Even if the deal's not great and falls apart, there's what I call a minimum viable deal thesis, where if your minimum thesis is checked and you're good, the whole thing can fall apart. You can change management, change all the employees over a span of a year or longer, but you can still be accretive and net benefit for the overall organization if you're used to that. And so just most aren't. So although, you are incrementally and experimentally going into the market of M&A and learning while doing, you're still continuing to do it, Mike. So that means you are getting positive feedback that this is still productive for the business, not a waste of time, even though it sounds like they're, as they are, messy.
Yeah.
So number 3, Canada. Don't go to Canada.
Yeah. I mean, but go with your eyes open. Yeah, right.
Limit your acquisition interest in Canada. People often ask, what's it like to transact internationally? Did you fly to where he was located in Canada?
Yeah, it was Toronto, so it wasn't horrible. But yeah, all of these agencies required us, all these acquisitions required us to go out there and spend time with them and get to know some of their people and look at their operation. Again, like this was all pre-COVID, so they had offices and they had people in offices. So we would go and spend time with them and get to know them more. Like again, this guy in Canada, every time HubSpot had inbound, we would have beers, right? So I knew the guy well. It was like a very good fit. I was actually shocked that this ended the way it did. What could I have done differently other than pulling his medical records, which I don't think would have been viable? Like, I don't know what I could have possibly done to know he was going to respond like that.
Yeah. And again, you had a deal structure and a playbook that protected the company. Did Square 2 have any issues while you were being acquisitive and paying attention and traveling to these agency locations? Like what did the day-to-day of the business look like, or did it not have any interruption?
So we were always very good at not having the business rely on us, right? And I say that more about me than about Eric, my business partner. So sales did pretty much rely on him a lot, but you could have a sales meeting if you're in Canada for a couple of days, right? Again, like we were virtual. Zoom was a thing we used even pre-COVID. So like you could do sales even if you weren't in our office, right? You could do finance even if you weren't in our office. But the company always had good people in it. So it never, at least I shouldn't say never, but pretty quickly it didn't rely on me. I had a really good number 2 who worked with us for she's still there now, 12 years. Started as a consultant, moved up to strategic consultant, director of client services, COO, president eventually. So, I could rely on her to keep the trains running. We had good systems and processes at Square 2. Nothing was like getting figured out on the fly. Good rhythms to the business in terms of how we were meeting and talking about it and our metrics and what we were tracking towards goal setting. Like we ran it on EOS. Prior to that, we ran it on scaling up. Like we always had these overlaid systems that the company ran on that made it possible for me to do some other things, like run this agency consulting company and focus on M&A and just oversee what was going on in the company and step in and help where they needed me. Like, hey, this process isn't working right. Great. Let me see if I can help figure it out, make some recommendations on how to fix it, and then turn it over to you guys. Great. Take these 6 things we're going to do differently and install them. And then we'll talk about it in 2 months. How are we doing? Right. So that was the way we ran Square 2, and it worked really well.
So what year are we now in the story?
This is probably 2018.
Okay.
I think the last big acquisition we did was around then.
Yeah, let's unpack the
and
big
that was
one.
our biggest. That was our biggest acquisition. We were almost the same size. I think we were a little bit bigger than them. I think at the time we were doing 4. This company was doing 3 million. And again, it scratched this very specific itch for me. They were on the West Coast. They had a lot of technology clients. They were a Marketo shop. And I wanted to expand our technology practice out of just HubSpot, I did not want to teach my HubSpot crew how to learn another technology. I wanted to just buy another set of people who could do the same work we did with HubSpot with another tool set. And we had so much success being in the HubSpot community. I wanted to replicate that in the Marketo community. And she had a good relationship with Marketo.
How'd you get connected with her?
Conference. I think we went to like it was a marketing conference. I don't in Arizona, I think. And I met her once. This deal took a little longer. I met her. We talked. Yes, I'm interested. We kind of hit it off. And then she said no. And some months went by, and then I saw her at another, it might have been a Marketo conference, actually, the second time around. I went to a Marketo conference, and she said, Mike, I think I want to revisit it. And I was like, great, because I really regret us not being able to do something the first time. And she shared with me that there were some like health issues in her family that made her a little more open to considering, taking some chips off the table and doing something differently. So it kind of put some acuteness around her pain to do a deal. And that was our biggest deal yet. And again, like I mentioned, my 3-month integration plan, I was trying to learn from that. And because this was the biggest one and the most complicated, I gave us a year to do the integration. And interestingly enough, the people in the acquired agency were like, what's taking you so long? What are you doing? Like, move this thing along faster. So like, you can't win for losing when you try to figure this stuff out.
All of these deals have conflicts in them and interactions. Do any particularly stand out or resonate, or do you remember like challenging to get these deals done?
This particular deal, there wasn't much conflict around getting the deal done. It was good for her and it was good for us. Again, the same deal structure. I think she probably got more up front because she was a bigger business and she was a little savvier than some of the others, but the same floor structure was in place. You perform, you get paid. You don't, you don't. The conversation I had with her was, well, what do you want to do when we put these companies together? And she said, well, I really want to take care of sales. And we have been looking forever for someone to get Eric out of sales because he had been doing it for 15, 17 years. He was tired. So her saying she wanted to do sales was great, right? For both of us. We were like, and she was good at it. And it's what she did at her agency, right? She was very well networked, West Coast technology companies, bigger companies than we typically worked with, which was also something I was interested in. And also, again, Marketo. She was in the Marketo community. She knew a lot of people in the Marketo community. So I was like, this is going to be great. Sounds good. Done, right? 3 months after the deal was done, she was like, Mike, I don't think I want to do sales. I was like, okay, what do you want to do? She's like, well, I want to take care of the customer. I was like, okay, great. We need someone to do that too. Like we're doing a pretty good job at it. But to me, having a high level person with a lot of experience doing it seemed like a positive for the business. I was like, great. Sounds good. 3 months after that, she was like, I don't want to do that either. And then at that point, I was like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like what you have to tell me what you want to do. I can't tell you what you want to do. And she couldn't really come up with anything. And I think at that point she had gotten to know, I'll just say she got to know Eric a little bit better. Didn't really like Eric that much. And didn't really want to do it with us anymore. Which again, like there's always something like this that pops up. Like I used to do a lot of events, Peter, and I used to say to my crew prior to the event, I'm like, something's going to go wrong. I guarantee you something's going to go wrong. How we handle it is the difference between a successful event and an unsuccessful event. So let's just make sure we're prepared to handle what goes wrong, right? Yep. And it was true, right? The mics don't work. We had backups. The lights didn't work. We had whatever, right? Whatever you think could go wrong is going to go wrong. You got to plan for it. It's the same thing with these deals. You just have to be like prepared to deal with whatever comes up, mitigate it as best you possibly can up front, and be able to deal with it. And that's what we did. She left. We were fine. The outcome of her leaving was some of her people also decided that they wanted to go, but it happened slowly. So we were able to replace them and it wasn't a big deal. And, we got what we wanted out of it. We got a lot of clients. We got a lot of revenue. We got into the Marketo community. I was a little disappointed that Marketo was not as interested in our agency as HubSpot was. I literally could not get their attention. I kept saying, like, I'm the biggest HubSpot shop there is. Don't you want to work with me? They couldn't care less. So that didn't work out like I thought it was going to work out, but it's okay. We still had Marketo clients and we had Marketo expertise, so we could tell people that and we could play in that sandbox. But I consider that a successful transaction.
Well, you had a good playbook, right? Again, that minimum viable deal thesis. You weren't coming too much out of pocket on close
Right.
to overburden the expectations of the business,
Right.
to not handle these types of common, messy post-deal integration, post-deal happiness situations. So kudos to you. I mean, that's a very important principle, which is you don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And you grew up in your deals. Like you slowly got to a point to where you felt comfortable transacting at someone closer to your size. And was that the last transaction before the last transaction?
Yeah, I mean, we did a couple of acqui-hires that I don't even consider those really deals. We did a couple of acqui-hires along the way too. After that deal, a bunch of the people that worked for me was like, Mike, stop doing these because it's extremely distracting to what we're trying to do here. And I kind of took that feedback to heart and I put the brakes on the deals. If I remember correctly, the economy wasn't doing great then either, or something was going on, financial crisis, or I forget exactly, so long ago. But I said, yeah, you're right. Let's just hit the pause button on that for the foreseeable future. I was still looking, even though they didn't know that. I was still like looking around, and I think I mentioned to you, like, there were a couple of people that I was interested in, and they just never got deep enough into it with us for me to even mention it to anybody. So as far as the team was concerned, we weren't doing anything, but I was still kind of looking around and talking to people and seeing if anything was going to be a good fit.
Yeah, which is so important. You never turn off the pipe.
Right.
So this gets you to some degree of critical mass. You have accumulated acquisitions. Give us a picture. How many offers did you make? Like, yes, you got to this many transactions, but how many people were in the pipeline, and how many people made it to the offer stage of that pipeline?
No one else really made it to the offer stage. And again, that was kind of like the way we would work with clients also. Like, I didn't want to get to know at the end. I wanted to get to know at the begin. No, N-O. I wanted to get to N-O at the beginning. So a lot of these people who we were talking to, like, I basically said, like, do you want to do this deal? Before we got to the LOI, before we got to due diligence, before we really spent any money and got into it, I was like, look, if this doesn't make sense to you, tell me now. Like, and I would basically say to them like that, like blunt words. And the ones that I thought were good, they didn't want to do it. One guy just in my opinion, got nervous about what it would be like to have partners, to integrate his agency into ours. He was doing okay. He could have been doing better, but I think he just got nervous. One of the guys who was probably, again, the same size as us, who would have been a really good fit, he basically said to me, like, my wife wants to build a barn. I need cash. Like, I'm taking it out of the business. If I'm with you guys, I'm not going to be able to do that, right? And I was like, yeah, you won't be able to do that. So he was like, yeah, I can't do it. I think I got to just do this on my own. So, we had some like blunt adult conversations that I pressed them enough for them to be honest with me. So we didn't really go too far into it for the deal to not work out.
So M&A is seductive. It's fun. It's almost more fun than running the agency. After you told the team you weren't doing anymore, you still did it. How did Mike transform into someone who preferred being the deal maker instead of a marketer?
It's a good question. I don't really feel like I transformed. I feel like my approach to our business has always been, I want to help you, right? I want to help my clients. They're struggling with growth. And I know what they're not doing. I know how to help them fix it, right? It was the same thing with these agencies. I wanted to help them. They wanted to get bigger. They wanted to be some of them larger stars in the HubSpot community. I had a path to that at the time. And I felt like us getting together was going to help them. Yes, it was going to help me, obviously, but it was going to help them too. One time I had Brian Halligan, the CEO, ex-CEO of HubSpot, invited a bunch of us to his apartment at one of the inbounds. And I had 10 minutes to talk to the guy. And he said to me something that resonated with me. He said, being a smaller owner of a bigger business is a good idea. So I kind of took that to heart, right? Like, I don't need to own all of the business. I can own less of a bigger business and it's still going to be good. Not all the people I was talking to had that same mindset. And that's kind of what it came down to for the deals that didn't go through. And specifically, those two that I'm talking about never did anything. They're still by themselves. One of them is doing better, and the other one is doing the same as he's been doing, like growing slowly a little bit over time.
Yeah. So you and Eric have been in this journey together, good partners, divvying it up, taking your areas and owning them, then expanding geometrically, adding acquisitions, and you this big move. When did the idea of getting out kick in?
Right. So, again, the HubSpot community is attractive to a lot of outside investors. So, like many agencies, we had been getting all kinds of unsolicited interest. Hey, I want to buy your business, right? Like, some of it is complete BS, right? Like, it's kind of obvious to see like the stock emails or whatever it is you're getting, the LinkedIn connections or however they're trying to get in touch with you.
Yeah.
And some of them are legitimate. And we were pretty good. Again, like I used to just send all that to Eric and he would kind of like sift through it. And again, he said very blunt stuff to these people like, we get these kind of emails all the time. Like, if you're really interested, like tell me what you have in mind. And if they didn't have anything like real, we would just say, yeah, no thanks. And we pursued a number of opportunities. There was this kind of interesting conglomeration of agencies across the whole planet that this guy in Europe was spinning up, that he wanted to get us to sign like a commitment contract. And then he was going to take that whole collection of unconnected agencies to someone and get them to buy it. And I was like, I don't think anyone's going to buy that, but if it doesn't cost me anything to sign that, I'd consider it. And that whole thing like blew up. So he never even got too far into that. We went down a path with a friend of mine who had an agency and a broker who was putting agencies together for a PE company. So he connected me and I introduced him to my friend at this other agency, and we were talking, we were kind of getting into it. I think we were doing due diligence. I don't think we ever got to an LOI. And one day the PE company was like, yeah, we don't think we want to do this. I was like, okay, like whatever. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, everyone has their own agendas and their objectives. And so there were a number of opportunities like that. One guy wanted us to self-finance, right? Eric and I were like, we're not doing that. So like, there were all kinds of interesting, call it creative, I don't know, opportunities. None of them were really what we were looking for. And, Eric and I talked about the business pretty openly. And early 2023, he said, Mike, I think I just don't want to do this anymore. I think I want to do something else. So I want you to buy me out. And I want you to buy me out by June of 2023. So, after the shock wore off, I was like, okay, I think I can handle this without him. And we put together a structure for me to buy him out and pay him out over time. And we executed that. And he left the business in June. And literally the very last week of June, the guys that ended up buying us presented themselves, and it was clearly a PE company. They had already done an acquisition. There was a platform business in place. They had a good thesis for their own acquisition strategy. And I felt like this is legit, right? And again, my advisors told me this is legit. So, I told Eric what was going on, and I worked out a way for him to benefit from the transaction. I benefited more, but I included him in it. And it worked out for everybody. He was happy. I was happy. He got something out of it. The acquiring company didn't care because it was all on me to deal with Eric. And everyone seemed to get what they wanted out of it.
How much difference was there in the approach that this firm took with you than what you had done to the market in your acquisitions? Was it more formal?
It was more formal. Obviously, the PE company does acquisitions for a living, right? So they had a whole deal team that participated, due diligence people, lawyers. Like it was a lot of due diligence on my part specifically. But the deal was like no other deal I've seen before. So it was a very beneficial deal for me. And all my advisors said, you're probably not going to get a deal like this again.
Take the money and run, Mike.
So I felt like it was the right thing for me at the time. I was also excited about the combination. Like I liked their theory. They had an outsourced sales company, right? So if you don't want to hire reps, they got you reps. They had bought a sales training company. So if your reps aren't good, we'll train them. And my company was going to be, and if you need more leads for your reps, we'll help you with your marketing. So it made a lot of sense to me. They also like the technology practice because it spans sales and marketing on the HubSpot platform. So I was excited about the opportunity, and I didn't want to like not work with them. I wanted to stick around and help them get this business to the next level and do another transaction at some point down the road. So there were a lot of positives associated with why I wanted to do the deal. It was not just about money. In fact, I've said to them that the money is nice, but that isn't really why I did this. I did it because I liked where they were going with this business and thought it represented an interesting opportunity in a market that is struggling.
Yeah.
For businesses that help other businesses grow.
How long did the process take? Because they approached you in
about
June.
5 months. About 5 months. So we met them in June. We started talking in June. The deal closed in November.
Got it. Is there any period of that time where you thought the deal wasn't going to go through, that it wasn't a good fit, or there's something that came up?
There were a few times when I felt like they were maybe dragging their feet a little bit, where I started to get a little concerned that it might not go through. I don't know whether they were or not. I think it was just taking longer than they thought it would. Maybe their original estimate on how long. I think the original told me September. Maybe that was too aggressive, like in general. But other than the time it was taking, like the communication was good. Like they were asking for a lot of stuff. We were giving it to them. Again, I had people helping me with some of that due diligence, so I could still focus on the business. But a decent amount of it came down on me.
So for the listeners out there who might be considering like their first acquisition or eventually selling, what would you say the top lessons from this journey were, and how can they prioritize those for a smooth process for them?
My first bit of advice would be this probably sounds scary to a lot of people, especially when you've been on your own for a long time, any period of time. If you've been on your own in an agency and now you're talking about acquiring one or being acquired, I could see how that would be scary, right? I don't know what's that going to be like. I'm going to have a partner, finances, decision making. Like there's so many things that go into that. I think you have to like muscle through that. That would be my advice. Is change is not bad. Change is good in many situations if you're managing the change. And I think also in this case, you can be smart about the potential risks that you're going to be dealing with and put in some thought to how you're going to mitigate that risk, right? Now what you do is provide a lot of risk mitigation services, ideas, tools, methodology that make the risk less intimidating to a lot of people. So I think that's a good place to start. But it is almost impossible to grow an agency organically. today. And it's harder today than it was when I was doing it. And it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder, in my opinion. So I think agencies have to start thinking about combining, merging, acquiring. Like, you just have to. There are benefits in scale, and there are benefits in size in almost every scenario, right? If you have two people doing the same job, you might not need one of them, right? If you have two accountants, two HR people, like, you just don't need the duplication of effort. And lots of times those people can do what they're doing and do it on a larger scale. So I think the benefits outweigh the risks, and I think the risks are very mitigatable, if that's a word. And I think if you're running an agency today, you have to be thinking about this, or else you're probably not going to be around too much in the future.
No, highly fragmented, ripe for disruption with technology, being more and more commoditized by the internal marketer who can do the things that you can do. It's a challenge for the sector. And better together is not just a t-shirt. It's an actual way to go forward as a business and to sustain value. Not to mention the vast majority of agencies who also have been in it for multiple decades. And getting out makes the most sense when you get to it. You did your acquisition, then out. Acquire, then sell. You don't have to acquire 6, but one of the fastest ways for you to get out is to do your first acquisition that gets you something you didn't have, that gets you over the threshold, and then allows you to get your exit. Mike, thank you so much for sharing your story. You're always a wealth of insights, as you have been since I think I first met you. Transparent. You share the journey, and I know the listeners will take so much from this. Before we wrap, where can people find you? What are you doing now? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm, I guess, somewhat enjoying a little bit of retirement right now, but I'm working with some companies to help them with their business. I'm doing some general business consulting. I'll probably have some semblance of a business around that at some point in 2025, but I'm more than happy to talk to anybody at any time about this. And you can simply send me an email, mikecircle34@gmail.com, and I will respond to you pretty quickly. And, again, if you want to talk, we can set something up. I have a passion for helping agencies navigate this challenging environment. I feel like I have a lot of experience sharing that I can do to help people navigate the potholes and get around the detours so they don't have to make some of the same mistakes I do. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that stuff at any time.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Peter. It's been great. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks again to Mike for joining us, and to all of you for tuning in to Agency Acquisitions and Exits. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a follow on Spotify or YouTube and share it with someone who might benefit from Mike's story. We appreciate your support. Until the next time, stay safe and keep building.